Hello and welcome everyone, and today I want to show you how to craft 7-link spell-based weapons for caster or minion builds that you want to use in tandem with the Squire. The crafting process utilizes a range of different meta crafting techniques that I will be talking about in detail. I wanted to make this crafting guide despite it being very late in the league for two main reasons. Firstly, I'm using a weapon like this one on my Lightning Golem Ascendant and I want people to understand how I'm crafting my gear. And secondly, I think weapons like this and builds utilizing them will be more common in the future because of the changes to the gem system in Path of Exile 2, which will provide us with the benefit of a 6-link in the weapon slot without having to utilize an item like the Squire. Before we take a deep dive into the crafting process, I want to explain the basics of this craft. We combine a Shaper base with socketed skills, deal more spell damage, or socketed gems are supported by critical strikes, the caster version of that modifier to be specific, and an Elder base with socketed gems are supported by spell echo, utilizing an Awakener's Orb. There are two different strategies to introduce the third mod depending on the Shaper item you used earlier, which I will elaborate later. The next step involves adding and removing modifiers with Exalted Orbs and Orbs of Annulment, with a meta mod protecting the other modifiers you introduced earlier until you hit the penetration modifier of choice. The last step involves using an Exalted Orb to try to hit an additional relevant modifier, or using Tempering Orbs to roll for the can have one additional crafted modifier enchant and putting on said additional crafted modifier. I'm going to use Craft of Exile to simulate the crafting process and to show you all relevant outcomes that you might encounter. The first method I want to show you involves combining a Shaper base with socketed skills heal more spell damage, and an Elder base with socketed gems are supported by Spell Echo, utilizing an Awakener's Orb. If the resulting item has 3 suffixes, or an additional unwanted suffix with a caster tag, let's say like this one, then you have to use an Orb of Annulment to remove them. If the resulting item has an unwanted prefix with a caster tag, let's say we rolled this for example, then you would have to use an Orb of Annulment to remove it as well. If you remove one of the target modifiers, you have to start over again. If you've completed steps 2 to 3, you should now have an item with socketed skills deal more spell damage, and socketed skills are supported by Spell Echo without any additional mods that have a caster tag, and a maximum of 2 suffixes. If your item has less than 3 prefixes, you need to craft cannot roll caster modifiers, and use Exalted Orbs to fill out the prefixes. If your item has more suffixes than socketed skills are supported by Spell Echo, you need to craft cannot roll caster modifiers if it's not already on the item, and use Orb of Annulments to remove them. If you accidentally remove a prefix that way, you have to reintroduce it using Exalted Orbs immediately. And you're going to repeat steps 4 to 6 until you have an item that has socketed skills deal more spell damage with 2 additional dummy prefixes that don't have a caster tag, and socketed gems are supported by Spell Echo and no additional suffixes. The next step involves crafting a block mod, which is minion attack and cast speed for minion wands like this one. For regular wands, you want to be using dexterity, intelligence, and increased attack speed instead, and use an Exalted Orb to introduce a new modifier. If you've hit a modifier that has a caster tag, like this one for example, you would have to use an Orb of Annulment to remove it. If you accidentally remove one of the target modifiers, you would have to start over. Otherwise, if you do manage to remove it, you can go back to step 4 and go through the crafting process from that point onward, until you're back at an item that has socketed skills deal more spell damage, 2 dummy prefixes without a caster tag, socketed gems are supported by spell echo, and no additional suffixes. After putting on the block mod, you can use an Exalted Orb again to introduce a new modifier. Let's say you hit a modifier that doesn't have a caster tag, like this one for example. Then you can immediately go back to step 5, which includes putting on cannot roll caster modifiers, trying to remove the suffix, potentially reintroducing prefixes if you remove them that way, just like we did before, until you're back at this point. So you can use another Exalted Orb to introduce a new modifier. And there's of course one more outcome, the outcome that we're looking for, which is us actually hitting the modifier that we want, which is socketed gems are supported by increased critical strikes in the caster version. It's very important that you get the caster version, because the attack-based version will get removed in the next step, and you can differentiate the caster version from the attack version by the caster tag and the increased critical strike chance for spells that the modifier provides. You should now have an item that looks like this. Socketed skills deal more spell damage, 2 additional non-caster prefixes, socketed skills are supported by spell echo, and socketed skills are supported by critical strikes in the caster version. In general, the first method is better for regular ones than for minion ones because of the additional minion modifiers on the latter, which lower the probability of hitting the target modifier. The second method I want to show you involves combining a Shaper base with socketed gems are supported by critical strikes, the caster version of course, and an Elder base with spell echo utilizing an Awakener's Orb. If the resulting item has a third suffix, you need to remove it using an Orb of Annulment. If you remove one of the target modifiers in this or the next step, you have to start over. If the resulting item has 3 prefixes, like so for example, you have to remove the one with an Orb of Annulment as well. If you've completed those steps, you should now have an item with socketed gems are supported by critical strikes, the caster version of course, and socketed gems are supported by spell echo, while having a maximum of 2 suffixes and 2 prefixes. The next step involves crafting, can have up to 3 crafted modifiers to block up the last suffix. Suffixes cannot be changed. And then using the Harvestcraft Reforged Caster, which can result in 4 possible outcomes. For example, the item can end up with 3 prefixes that all have a caster tag, like so. At which point you're going to have to remove one of them using an Orb of Annulment. If you accidentally remove one of the target mods, you have to start over again. If you remove a prefix, you can go back to step 4, unless the item has rolled the prefix socketed skills deal more spell damage, at which point you can proceed to outcome C. The other possibility is that the item rolled 3 prefixes, of which at least one does not have a caster tag, like so for example. And at this point you're going to have to remove the can have up to 3 crafted modifiers mod, put on cannot roll caster modifiers, and remove one of the prefixes that does not have a caster tag with an Orb of Annulment. Once you've removed a prefix, you can go back to step 4, unless the item has rolled the prefix socketed skills deal more spell damage, at which point you can proceed to one of the following outcomes. If the item has an additional prefix with a caster tag, you have to proceed to C, otherwise you can proceed to the last outcome. Which brings me to the next outcome. On occasion, your item will roll the target modifier socketed skills deal more spell damage, like so. and an additional prefix with a caster tag, like this one. So you have to craft suffixes cannot be changed and have to use an orb of annulment to remove the additional prefix with the caster tag. If you remove the socketed skills deal more spell damage mod, you have to go back to step 4. If you remove the unwanted modifier with the caster tag, you can proceed to outcome D. And outcome D, the last outcome, the one that we actually want, your item has rolled socketed skills deal more spell damage and no additional prefixes with caster tags. So for example, your item could look like this, right? And this would be the target outcome that we're actually looking for, that you're actually rolling for with this method. So an item that has socketed skills deal more spell damage, 0 to 2 additional prefixes that don't have a caster tag. Socketed skills are supported by Spell Echo, and socketed skills are supported by critical strikes in the caster version. Independently of the method you used to arrive at this state, you can now remove the can have up to 3 crafted modifiers if present on your item, put on cannot roll caster modifiers, and remove unwanted prefixes. And reintroduce new prefixes using exalted orbs. Just make sure that the cannot roll caster modifiers is present on your item at all times. I'm now going to show you this step of the crafting process in game. Utilizing the Chris Wilson technique to hit one of the penetration mods took me quite some time, so buckle up and enjoy the show. As you can see, I finally ended up hitting one of the 3 penetration mods. Luckily, I ended up with lightning penetration, which is exactly what I was going for. Since I hit it on the first prefix, I didn't have to remove an additional prefix, so I simply crafted +2 levels of socketed support gems, and decided to finish the item by going for the Exalt Slam, but of course did not end up hitting anything interesting. For the Crucible mods, you can either craft them after crafting the explicits, or craft them on a base that you will end up with after using the Awakener's Orb, which also allows you to utilize imprints, which is more expensive, but does speed up the process a lot. Sadly, I ended up accidentally corrupting my wand while crafting the Crucible mods. Optimally, you want to combine your item without having any Crucible mods allocated for the first step, but since it was corrupted, I could no longer remove the unwanted Crucible mod. After successfully crafting both mods onto my wand, I allocated them and combined it with an item that had a pierce in a spot that was void on my item to increase the chance of adding it to the Crucible tree. I should have gone for a 4th mod like Volley, but since crafting Crucible mods on corrupted items is very expensive and it's pretty late in the league, I decided to stop the crafting process here. Total crafting cost for the explicits was about 150 divines, with the average probably being around 150 to 250 divines for one with a specific penetration modifier, so I probably got kind of lucky there. And this is pretty much it for the crafting guide. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comments below. I try to get to them as soon as possible. Hope you have more luck than I did. Don't corrupt your wand, and see you in the next one.